Hello and a very warm welcome, viewers. You're watching the brand new edition of To The Point with your host, Kriti Mishra. For more than a year now, the entire globe is focusing on fight against COVID-19, which has been described as the biggest pandemic in the last 100 years. India battled the first wave, the second wave, and now the COVID situation in the country appears to be stabilizing with decline in daily and active cases, and positivity rate is also coming down. As the country enters the phase of unlocking localized lockdowns, with the easing of many restrictions and opening up some essential economic activities, it is still not out of the COVID 19 woods. So, what should be our strategy ahead? Let's find out from a very special guest who joins us today on the show, Dr. Randeep Guleria, Director, All India Institute of Medical Sciences, which is AIMS, who's also part of the core team monitoring the pandemic situation in the country. So, welcome to Sunset TV, and thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you.
Dr. Guleria, we saw pictures of crowds at shopping malls, markets. The same mistakes are being made again. Roads leading to Himachal Pradesh saw congestions, bringing traffic to a standstill. As states are beginning to unlock the localized lockdowns, what is your biggest concern, sir?
So my biggest concern currently is that we are again going in the same state of not following COVID appropriate behavior, and despite realizing the effect that it had on us as far as the second wave is concerned, we are not being responsible, and this is allowing the virus to spread. We still have a large susceptible population who can get infected. Our vaccination needs is not to that extent that we can say everyone is vaccinated. So until we have a large number of people vaccinated, we must have aggressive COVID appropriate behavior. It's just a matter of a few months. But if we restrain ourselves, if we are careful, then we will not have the infection spreading, and we will be able to either totally avoid the subsequent wave or be able to dampen it so that it doesn't cause so much of suffering as the second wave did. So I think it's important for people not to forget what has just happened a few weeks ago and learn from that so that we don't make the same mistake again.
We have to learn from our own mistakes that we made in the past, sir. But as you're talking about the second wave, of course, Delta variant, we've been talking about it since a very long time. And now we have Delta Plus. Sir, what sets it apart from the other variants and what makes it so worrying or concerning?
So Delta, as we know, is the variant which is now a variant of concern not only for India but globally, as declared by the WHO, because it is now spreading rapidly and becoming more and more of a dominant variant. Also, it is more infectious. It infects people at a much faster rate, attaches to the cells through the ACE receptors much more rapidly and in a very strong manner as compared to the previous circulating strains. Also, what we've now noticed is that there is a mutation that has already happened in that variant and causing it to be called the Delta Plus, as in the same lineage there is a little bit of a variation in the mutant. It is still a variant of interest. That is that people are still exploring to see what this new Delta Plus can do and how it will evolve, because the number of cases still are not that large. But again, like we've been seeing over the last 1 year, the virus continues to mutate. Some mutations don't make that much of a difference. Some have a huge difference in our overall strategy because they become more infectious. We saw that with the Alpha variant, and we saw that with the Delta variant. So any new variant that comes up needs to be very closely monitored, and surveillance needs to be done so that we are able to pick up any surge that is happening due to that variant and don't allow that to really spread to other parts.
So, sir, what is your understanding of the reinfection cases that we are seeing? Is Delta variant associated with it? What is your take, sir?
So we need more data as far as reinfection is concerned. Now, there is definitely some degree of reinfection, but the number seems to be small. We must remember that it's always difficult to say how much of reinfection is happening, because we have a disease where many people, could be up to 30 to 40%, get the infection and they don't know that they were infected. You can be asymptomatic when you get the infection. So if you have someone who was asymptomatic and now he gets infected, is this the first infection or is it the second infection? You can't really make that out unless you had done the antibody titer in the past and shown that he had the infection and now it is a second infection. So this is always going to be a problem of how do we pick up accurately the number of reinfections, because many people are asymptomatic when the first infection has happened. But we need to be careful because we do know that in patients who have mild disease and who have had no symptoms or have been asymptomatic, they tend to have lower immunogenicity. Their antibody is less, and therefore they may be more prone to getting infection again 7, 8 months or 1 year later. And that is why vaccine plays an important part in the whole scenario.
So, vaccine plays a very important part, as you said. But, sir, besides the pandemic, we're also fighting the infodemic. Now, there are various theories about whether these vaccines are going to work on the Delta variant or the Delta Plus variant. So, could you please clarify on that?
So, the current data that is available, both for the vaccines which are being used globally, and everyone is studying to see whether the new variant, the Delta variant, the vaccines are effective against it or not. The current data suggests the vaccines will still be effective. They may decrease, the efficacy may come down to some extent, but still they will be effective because we have a good margin. Most vaccines have an efficacy of 70, 80, or even more than 90%. So it may come down to some extent, but the cutoff that WHO takes is more than 50%. So vaccine will still be effective because they will meet the basic cutoff, but they may have a decrease in efficacy. I think the data that we have currently suggests that most vaccines that are currently being used will still be effective, but we need to monitor this more closely because today we have the Delta variant. It may mutate and a new variant may come up, and how that behaves in terms of immune escape mechanism is something that we don't know.
So, then what do you suggest? Booster shot? Because there is a lot of talk about booster shots as well, sir.
So I suggest two things. One is that we must still continue to have COVID appropriate behavior because no matter what be the new variant, if we have COVID appropriate behavior, it cannot spread. It may be the Delta variant, it could be the Alpha variant or a new variant. If we wear a mask, if we wash our hands, if we maintain physical distancing, if we avoid crowds, the virus cannot spread no matter what be the variant. The second is we need to really do very close surveillance and do a lot of genome sequencing so that we pick up the new variants and see how they are working against various vaccines. We may need to tweak the vaccines to some extent and may need to have a booster down the line. It may not be this year, it may be early next year, but that will depend on how the virus evolves. But it is a possibility that we will need to have a booster sometime in the near future.
So, as you're talking about vaccines, there's also a debate on whether it's time to reduce 12 to 16-week gap between two doses of Covishield. What is your take?
So I think this is something that is being debated upon because if you look at data that emerged, and this is data which came out from various trials and were published in March in the Lancet and from other studies, it tended to show that if you were to increase the duration of vaccination to more than 12 weeks, your immunogenicity and the immunity that you got was much better. And with one shot also you got good infection, so that even if you got a good control of infection, so that even if you took one vaccine shot, you were protected. And if you took the second booster shot after 12 weeks, it gave you a better response. But that is true that this was with the Alpha variant, which was then circulating more commonly. And now the variant is becoming the Delta variant. So people are looking at these data now with the Delta variant, and based on that, a decision could be taken. But currently, the data is not sufficient enough to really jump the gun and says that we should straight away change to 8 weeks or so. It may happen based on as the data emerges, but this is something which is an ongoing process. Remember, we started with 4 weeks, and then we went up to 8 weeks, and then we went up to 12 weeks. So this will change as the data emerges and as we get to know more and more about the vaccine and the virus. And this is only for the Covishield vaccine or the AstraZeneca vaccine. These booster dose for all the other vaccines that are in the market, including Covaxin, continues to be the same. So it's only the data which is emerging for the AstraZeneca vaccine that is going to really change a little bit. But it has implications for our country because that is the main vaccine that we're using in India.
But, sir, very soon our vaccine basket would be expanded exponentially. Then there'll be another debate on which vaccine is better.
So this is going to be something which is going to be difficult to really come to know because most vaccines the efficacy has been looked in what we call clinical trial situation. And based on the clinical trial data, for the phase 3 data, the efficacy has been calculated. It is not really at times translated to real life situation or real world situation, and that may vary. So I think the data that we have is that all vaccines do work. Some may be a little better than the others, but we need to see how it evolves over the next few months in terms of the duration of immunity and the type of protection it gives against the new variant, which will emerge, and that may help us to differentiate one vaccine from the other. There's also a lot of issues going on what we call heterologous prime boost. That is, you give one vaccine as the prime and you give another vaccine as the booster, and whether that may give you a better response or not. So studies are also going on to see whether that is safe, it doesn't cause too much of side effects, and whether giving two different vaccines through two different platforms may give you a better immune response. So I think a lot of this will emerge over the next few months, and our vaccine strategy will change with time because as our knowledge of the vaccine efficacy evolves, we will actually change our strategy, and this will become even more important because, like you rightly said, so many vaccines will be available in India.
Absolutely, sir. Sir, this is, I know, a very difficult question to answer because we don't know how the virus is going to behave. But a common man has this question: can this virus mutate again to become even worse?
So theoretically, yes, viruses will mutate to become worse. Will mutate. There is no doubt that the virus will mutate. That is inherent to the property of the RNA viruses that they will continue to mutate. This happens with all our viruses that they will mutate. It's the rate of mutation that may be different and the type of mutation which may be different. But if you look at it from, let's say, the virus point of view, for the virus to survive, the host is very essential. That is, man is very essential. So if it becomes very, very virulent, it starts killing the host, then the virus will not survive. So as a part of evolution, what usually happens is that it becomes a milder disease, and you then have a sort of a mid path between the infection, COVID staying there, but not causing severe disease. So over the time, the virus may become more infectious, but it may become less virulent and may therefore be able to develop a sort of a balance between humans and the virus.
Dr. Guleria, you made a very important point there, and I'm also reminded that you've underscored the need for all hospitals and states to do a death audit for us to formulate a proper strategy. I also remember that Kerala Legislative Assembly recently debated who should decide if a patient has died of COVID or not. How do states develop that protocol, sir?
So there are two parts of this. One is to find the cause of death, and that can be done at times at what we call a virtual autopsy. You take a history, take a detailed evaluation, and you feel whether this mortality could be related to COVID, or it was just that COVID was incidental and this mortality was related to non-COVID. For example, someone having COVID and having a road traffic accident. That could be related to not COVID, but because of the accident that happened. So that is something that we need to do in terms of looking at it. But in my mind, the other important issue is to really see what was the cause of death and could it be prevented. Was it related to, let's say, late reporting to the hospital, too much of reliance of oxygen at home? Was it related to some treatment protocol which we could have made better? Was it related to patients not having enough information as to what are the warning signs and therefore not really coming to hospital at that point in time? Was it related to a stigma? There is also this stigma which is there in rural India. People don't want to get themselves tested because they feel if they are found to be COVID positive, they may be asked to go into another COVID care center, and they will be sort of thrown out of the village, if I put it that way. So those are the other things that we need to really address. And if these are issues, then we have to find solutions for them so that we can address the issue of mortality and bring it down by finding solutions for all of these issues.
All right, very valid point there, sir. But how soon can we expect to vaccinate our children?
So the trials are already on. Pfizer already has an approval as far as the FDA is concerned. Bharat Biotech is already doing its trial, and we're hoping that the result will be out quickly because the recruitment rate is very good. They've been able to recruit a large number of children. So it's just a follow-up that is required. So possibly by September, we should be having the clearance for the vaccines being available for children. But in my mind, whatever data we have currently, suggests that although it's important to vaccinate children so that we are out of this pandemic and we feel safe about children, the priority still has to be the high risk group, which are who are the elderly and those with comorbidities. Because still, if you look at the data from the first wave, from the second wave, the mortality was much more in those who had comorbidities and older age group. Children did not have that much of mortality. So although children should be vaccinated, but if I had to prioritize it, I would still say that we must focus a lot on the older age group. We must cover them quickly and on those with comorbidities.
And you've already gone on record and said that there is no data to suggest that third wave will impact children. But sir, there are several countries that have experienced the third wave. What are the lessons learned for India and how do we avert this third wave in our country?
So if you look at why third wave happened in various parts of the country and in various parts of the world and why it did not happen in certain countries, the lesson is very clear that besides vaccination, which we need to roll out, and that is number one, that we need to do it as quickly as possible. The second was a strict mechanism so that COVID appropriate behavior was maintained in these areas. People were kept restricted. There was even some degree of restricted or a partial lockdown so that the cases continued to be low. And even if there was a slight increase in the number of cases, there was imposition of some containment and restriction so that the disease did not go out of hand. So because of all of these measures, many countries, irrespective of their socio-economic status, were able to really come out and not have a large third wave. On the other hand, if this was not followed, then you are allowing the virus to spread and you are actually inviting the next wave.
All right, sir. Lastly, I know that it is incumbent upon all of us to follow the COVID appropriate behavior. But sir, this is an uncharted territory and we are traveling through an unprecedented, unperceived threat. We saw the changes in our protocols, whether it was plasma therapy or remdesivir. Going ahead, how can India address this in a more structured manner, sir, if I may ask?
So I think we have to learn from the lessons from the past and see what we can do, whether it be having a comprehensive plan so that we are able to provide medication, have good public health infrastructure so that we can quickly ramp up our ICU beds, our oxygen beds, be able to supply oxygen when it's needed so that we don't have this issue of oxygen shortage and a panic reaction. And at the same time, develop a strategy where we are able to see that both in the urban area and in the rural area, our health infrastructure is robust enough to manage these patients. At the same time, develop a good surveillance system so that we pick up any increase in the number of cases happening or pick up hotspots early and are able to develop containment strategies in those areas so that the infection doesn't go out of hand and we don't really have a huge surge which becomes difficult for the health system to manage. And at the same time, we have to keep on ramping up our testing because that helps us to pick up as many cases, pick up cases as early as possible.
Right, sir. And as you said in the beginning that all of us have to follow that COVID appropriate behavior, that is very important. On that note, Dr. Guleria, you joined us, you answered all those important questions. Thank you so much for speaking to us, sir.
Thank you. Thank you for having me.